Welcome to the Versopolis podcast. I'm Mitya Drap, and today we are opening Poetry Expo 2024. This year's theme is Versing Futures, Unraveling Unity Through Poetry. Joining me are two seasoned literary festival curators and organizers, Marko Pogačar and Pep Olona. Marko Pogačar is one of the most important poets and writers to emerge from Croatia in recent years. He has published 15 books of poetry, essays, and prose, for which he received Croatian and international awards. His books and texts have appeared in more than 30 languages, and Marko is also the director of Goran Spring. And also joining us is Pep Olona, the coordinator, curator, and ideologue of Arabeto Libros, a project that in 2023 celebrated 20 years and who runs the Arabeto Libros bookstore. He's organizer and coordinator of 17 editions of the Poetas Festival. And Pep is also behind the digital project Universal Poem, found at universalpoem.com. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. So Marko and Pep, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, and thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. For all the listeners who might be unaware of what Poetry Expo is a unique digital platform which can be attended by literary institutions, organizations, collectives, associations, festivals, etc. And this year's theme, Versing Futures, Unraveling Unity Through Poetry, Poetry Expo aims to inspire societal change by promoting the potential of literature and art to address the pressing issues of our time, such as the climate crisis, technological advances, mental health, and social inequalities. Poetry Expo is, of course, organized and curated by Versopolis. So first of all, Happy New Year to both, and we are already deep in January. But before we begin by unraveling unity through poetry, let us kind of recap the past year and give a short reflection of the respective past year's festivals. So Goran Spring in Zagreb and Poetas in Madrid. And I want to ask you both in the beginning, have the 2023 editions of your respective festivals stood out in some particular way? And maybe we can start, Pep.
About the festival, you were asking me about our festival, how it was?
Yes.
Actually, our festival is right now arriving to the 18th edition.
Uh-huh.
So, it lasts a lot, and it has lived and experienced the problems and that everyone has when try to organize this kind of festivals, just to survive a literature and more specifically a poetry festival in a big city such as Madrid. It's a big challenge because you have to try just to do a lot of efforts, just to have a lot of collaborations, institutional, public, private, a venue that tries just to bet for you. So we are happy. On one hand, we are happy just to celebrate this 18th edition this year in 2024. And at the same time, we are quite worried about that, how we will establish for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, because as I told you, it's so difficult. And right now, this kind of cultural festivals or events have a lot of challenges to keep alive.
Mm-hmm. So Marko, how would you compare that? How would you reflect on Goran Spring this past year? And are preparations for this year's festival already taking place?
Well, actually, for us, 2023 was quite a special year. We had the 60th anniversary of our festival. Goran Spring is one of the oldest, at least to my knowledge, poetry festivals in Europe. It was a kind of sister festival to Macedonian Struga Poetry Festival, which is, to my knowledge, probably the oldest one in this classical form that we are all used to see and attend, that happens annually since the early 60s. Both festivals emerged from the same common Yugoslav cultural and political space. For the past 30 years, of course, we've been apart, and our festivals took quite different routes. but it was very interesting now in recapping the past 60 years to observe how did the festival change, how did it grow, how did it kind of swim through all this political and cultural transition, and to actually try to also from within and sort of from the outer position to observe this point in which we are now, like already deeply in the 21st century. So from the festival focus in the beginning to oral forms, to recitation, to performing poetry, and for a festival focus to Yugoslav and then later Croatian authors, we kind of developed into full-scale, large international poetry festival with guests all over the world, focused to different types, of course, of poetry, but actually we went a different direction from Poetas. We kind of focused to bit more classical rhythm poetry, but also that is our mission maybe for the next phase. In the next 10 years, we want to maybe to introduce a bit of new forms, to open up more for the performing poetry, visual poetry, sound poetry, etc. So this was like a recap year for us to take a stand, take some time, turn back, and try to rethink what is there for us and for our ideas on presenting poetry and creating new spaces and terrains for poetry in the future. Also this year, we really invested a lot of time and effort in promotion. We used this anniversary that gave us a lot of media space, like some kind of a kickoff position. So we really kind of really multiplied our audiences for the first time in years. We really had like 200, 300, 400 people for the readings, which for Zagreb is extremely unusual.
So you would say that there is ample evidence that suggests that poetry is garnering more and more attention, kind of, even though we think that, well, at least some older people like to tell us that like we live in a digital age. So this is kind of, I don't know, maybe this is a little bit of a naive view, but you see a increase in the numbers, right?
Well, that's a slippery slope, because I think this high attendance. Okay, I would like to believe that the interest into poetry actually skyrocketed all of a sudden, but I think it's more that we finally figured out that we need, in a way, to leave that ivory tower of high culture and poetry a bit. Probably we were a bit too much closed in this. Okay, our mission is to offer exquisite, very good poetry from all around the world to the Croatian audience, and the audience will know how to recognize it, and they will appreciate it. And we kind of figured out that we got a bit obsolete, and that jazz things doesn't work that anymore, and we basically invested way more energy, time, and money into promotion, into social media, into direct communication with universities, schools, and so on, basically in some form of promotion and communication, and simply said PR, that we were not using as much before.
Mm-hmm. So Pep, do you have like a similar experience with this?
Yes, well, from us, we have a subjective perspective, because we own a bookshop, and from this bookshop is specialized in poetry. So, well, in some way, what they saw in these 20 years that we are working on that is that right now it's more common to find poetry publishers. There are many kinds. I will only speak about Spain, obviously, but here when I started, there was only, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 big poetry publishers. Right now there are a lot of, and not only publishers, also festivals, poetry festivals. Many kinds of poetry, as Marko said. There is a typical and original way to see poetry on a stage is with readings, but at the same time you can find another kind, more experimental, mixing different kind of art. And these kind of proposals, they're really now, they are really huge in Spain. There are a lot of. So I think obviously it's more easy right now just to publish because of the digital transformation and internet as well. So in some way, there are more facilities right now just to publish poetry and to develop your image, social media as well. But there is more attention also in press, in radios about what we are doing on. One example could be that right now there are festivals that usually these festivals are typical from music or theater, but right now they put one stage just focus on poetry. So because they know that there is an audience that want to see this kind of performances. Yes, to sum up, yes, I think that right now, at least in Spain, we are living a really good moment about poetry in all the branches, just in publishing houses, in the number of poets and how these poets are arriving to the audience. Also the audience that want to read this kind of poetry, and also on the stages of poetry.
So it was interesting for me when I read your Poetas slogan somewhere. I found that poetry is poetry and everything that poetry is poetry and everything that is not. And this already kind of suggests that experimentation and transgression. So you said that so far, how has the poetry scene, in your opinion, changed in the past 17 years of the festival's edition? Is there a pronounced shift towards more like, transgressive or kind of experimental forms?
Well, I think that all of us have changed. First that I have changed is myself. Because right now I just want to do a different kind of things. Right now we are starting a new chapter of this poetry festival, and for example, right now we like to produce our own events, and just not to put one artist on one stage, but try to produce poetical events. So that's the first thing that right now we are working on that. And yes, as you said, what we always try is to call poetas to a different kind of artists, and it's the big fight that we are doing. Just try to put, I don't know, maybe musicians, humoristic people, different kinds of people that use the word, the language, or just because of what they do or how they do, we think that it's in some way poetical things. And we try just to create an atmosphere. Maybe it will be just a way to explain what we try to do in our festival. It's more important to create an atmosphere for the audience than just to think about one name or another name to put on the stage.
So like more like a vibe that encapsulates everything. So that's great. So Marko, you yourself came on the scene blazing with your first book, Pia Vice nad Santa Cruz, and published at the young age of 22. So that was back in 2006. And as someone who has first seats to the young poetry scene, how has the poetry scene changed during this time, if at all, significantly? I know you also edited the Young Croatian Lyric Anthology in 2019. So how do you see the future of poetry?
Well, I'm not sure I would take this position to think about the future in this moment, but for sure, like if we go back to the mid 2000s, when my first book appeared, yeah, for sure, it was very different poetic landscape. We were still in this transitional period. We were recovering from Yugoslav wars in every sense. I mean, also the poetry scene through the 90s was a bit in a stagnation. Then at the very tail of the 90s and the early 2000s, we had this like small and short-lasting boom of this neo-mimetic new urban everyday life poetry with a couple of books that really exploded.
Tatjana Gromača, maybe Tatjana Gromača.
Yes, Tatjana Gromača, Draugla Muzina, Vlado Bulic, Vojara Dašinović, a couple of authors that appeared and kind of were all of a sudden widely read. Those poems all of a sudden mattered to this new generation. They were so much apart from this, what we had in the 90s, what was basically the heritage of the 80s, this hermetic textualist gestures and poetics that were really, really academic and really detached from non-professional readers. So at that time, kind of poetry in one short bliss came back to the scene, came back to the focus of the media. All of a sudden, big publishers wanted to print poetry again. But somehow this lasted for a very short period of time, only a year or two. And most of those authors never published poetry books again, or they published them maybe just now, 20 years ago. They switched to prose or just disappeared. So somehow when I published my first book, the scene was quite empty and in stagnation. And like since that, we haven't had something like a very strong movement or somehow like a group or something that you generation that you could connect to a magazine or to some kind of stronger poetical or political stronghold. It was more or less some kind of the phase of different poetics and different voices. And then in the past 5-6 years, again, something like a generation of young poets emerged, a lot of them girls, quite detached again from this everyday life language poetry, deeply into metaphors, at the same time a bit hermetic and very intimate and emotional. So new connection to the readership was kind of formed. And also this generation was heavily riding on the wave of this huge paradigmatic change in technology. They were already a generation of social networks, Gen Z. They were totally soaked in this new media landscape, which basically, I think, almost revolutionized our poetry scene. I mean, I believe it's a global thing. Of course, not all the things that emerged out of that are good. I think there's also a myriad of bad things backlashing to the poetry scene, but also really a lot of good things emerged out of that. The scene is restructuring. It's, I think, more present than it probably ever was. And it's in some kind of a state of a constant change. It's very hard to kind of to judge it or to comment it from within, from this very historical point. But it's going to be, because it's very dynamic, but I think it's extremely interesting to follow it in real time and to participate. And it's going to be tremendously interesting to look back on it in like 10 years period. I mean, 10 years from now, it seems like a distant history that we cannot even predict. That's why it's also so unthankful to give any predictions about the future of poetry.
Yes, it's a very kind of a delicate line in the beginning, how you said that it's good that poetry kind of loses its servitude to being this high-end kind of ivory tower. But then if it goes to the masses, then of course a lot of bad poetry will also come of it. And we already talked on the podcast about this, and we were we came to the conclusion that it's best, even if people are reading bad poetry and feeling good about it, then it is serving its function well to some degree. Maybe it will open them up to maybe better poetry in the future or something like that. I think we talked about this with Monica Herceg, which is one of the kind of younger like 30s poets now. So Pep, would you say that would you agree with this? Would you say that social media changed the poetry scene also in Spain?
Yeah, well, social media changed everything, and obviously
Yeah.
But
Obviously, yeah.
right now, everyone has their own channel just to promote themselves. Just in any way, if someone writes a poetry, writes novels, play music, do theater, I don't know. Everyone, it's like a way just to promote oneself. It's like the worst thing, in my opinion, of social media, because I don't know. I don't like too much because it in some way it don't helps my brain just to work on. So, but I think obviously social media has a positive part that could be just to promote projects, to promote poetry, to promote everything. And obviously right now, I don't know, there are poets that and there are publishers that they choose their authors just paying attention to how amount of followers these poets have. Obviously, it exists, and usually these kind of publishers that do this kind of choices are the biggest one. That they only want to sell books. They don't have a projection. They don't have a theory. That the only thing that they are trying just to do is to sell books. And I think that, well, all the goals are good in my opinion. I think that if one wants to publish a young poet because this poet has, I don't know, 1 million of followers, okay, it's good. It's good. Why not? Maybe it will help just to promote and to publish another kind of publishers, and it's happening a lot here in Spain. There are special things that has happened in Spain. For example, there's a poet that is able to put more than 5,000 people in the same space and completely quiet, just listening to her. Well, it's cool. Never has happened before in Spain. And so, anyway, if you like the poetry, you don't like the poetry, because everyone has their own, I don't know, their own tastes about everything, about music, about why reggaeton, I don't know, or trap music, or hip hop, or all of us think in a different way. So, for me, good or bad, it's not a good way just to speak about any topic. I think because all of us have different kind of opinions. So I think the important thing is like that each of us has to work with honesty part. I don't know how to say, but in a way that we want to do, or what we want to do, or that have clearly what we want to do. So I think social media are a good tool for all of us, and what we have to do is like to use them in a way just to know what we want to do with them. I don't know. We work a lot. We have, for example, right now in Arrebato, in our enterprise, we have 4 Instagram channels. We have one channel for the bookshop, another one for for Universal Poem, another one for our festival, and another one. So, and we try just to explain what we do, because it's so difficult sometimes just to explain. If you are working with poetry and with this kind of experimental project, in some way, it's really, really important to explain them to people, to the audience, because many people don't understand what we do. So I think in some way we can use this tool, this social media, to explain better what we do and how to arrive to more people. Because what I know, completely sure what I know, is that when we explain our projects to people, people are interested in that. And people are really surprised. And maybe the problem of the poetry is that we haven't been able to explain properly what we do and how poetry is. Because many people still are thinking that poetry is like verses written in a book. And yes, that's poetry. But there are many kinds different of poetry, more than that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting, because you said that sometimes it's not good that popularity, like clicks and likes and followers, should directly correspond to the how would you say, to the closeness to the big publishers. So this is, I think, as I read from your Author of the Week essay, is precisely what you want to do with Ediciones Indomitas. So what is Ediciones Indomitas, if I'm even pronouncing this correctly, and what happened last year that you were able to participate in the Madrid Book Fair? Because Madrid Book Fair is usually just for reserved for publishing houses who needs to sell a certain amount of books and publish a certain amount of books to even participate. So is this something that you can promote, voices that are a little bit maybe not as popular, but still worthy of being heard?
Well, the definition of this kind of publishers, Indomitas, they are, for example, the fanzines, there are the manufactured things, art books, I don't know, all the poetry that are published in a different way that is a book. So all that they have in common, these kind of publishers, that these kind of publications are completely different of the typical books. And also another characteristic that they have in common is the distribution. Most of them, or all of them, are not distributed with traditional enterprise of distribution. So usually in my bookshop, we have 1,000 of these kind of publishers, and they're completely crazy because they're really beautiful. They are objects that people like just in the first glance. The people, when say this kind of books, say, wow, that's incredible, because they have a lot of power, these books. So usually in our festival, we also organize this one of these fairs surrounding the main stage. And usually we invite 40, 50 publishers around the world. And from the last year, we had an agreement with the Madrid Book Fair. Because in Madrid Book Fair, all the publishers, booksellers, and distributions companies that are there, they are the typical, the traditional market of the book. So we propose them that it will be really interesting to have a place just to show this kind of publishers, that there are not just in Spain, also around the world. So last week we organized the first weekend, 3 days. We invite people from New York, Aguila Cliff Press, also from Bogota, La Nada Bookshop, that they are publishers as well, from Peru, from Europe, and also obviously from Spain. And right now we are working on the second edition. It will be for 2 weekends of the Madrid Book Fair, and we will invite 50 publishers of this kind that we say Indomitas. So in some way, it's a for me at least it's a big success that we did, because it's a way just to promote the independent publishers, that the real independent publishers, the people that work in a completely in the margins of this kind of business. So it's really interesting just to put them just on the main important event of the country. So I think that, well, it's another goal that we proposed, and we are really happy that it's a reality right now.
That's nice. So I want to change gears for a second. Let's just stay at technology. We talked about social media, but then another aspect of technology is important here, and we talked about it also on the podcast, but I still have so many questions, and I'm really aching to know what's your opinion on that. So how do you see like large language models that are developing over the last 2 years? So for example, AI poetry. We hosted Susanna, who wrote an entire collection of poetry using her bot, and she got like an award for the best Slovak poetry collection. What are your thoughts on AI poetry in the future? And do you have like a perspective on this, Marko?
Well, it's very hard to give any kind of predictions on that, I think, in this very point, because things are developing and changing so quickly, and I really think that this change is really a paradigmatical change. I mean, it's a new industrial revolution. Maybe it's going to be even stronger and more with a more impact than classical technological revolutions, because it's going to affect our structures of thinking and of structuring our mind and attention, I believe, way quicker than it happened following the steam, electricity, oil, and so on. So I think we are faced really with a systematical change altogether with AI and the development of these new tools. But for now, in this very point, I think, as Pepe said, for social networks, we still, I think, are to observe them as tools, what they actually are in this point. So tools can be used for various purposes, like quotation marks, goodly or badly, rightly or wrongly. But for sure, they are not meant not to be used in life, also in poetry and art. I mean, me personally, like I was never in any social media. I never had an account on anything. I'm totally off that. But of course, to promote the festival, we need to have all these channels, Instagram, Facebook, I don't even know. And I have to say that I don't even care until someone else is dealing with this and it's fulfilling its purpose. I think similar with AI, ChatGPT, this generative linguistical models, bots, and so on. Me personally, I'm more theoretically interested in these systems at this very point. Out of like practically, I don't even play with them too much. I have some other kind of goals in my own literary work. But I also fully support people playing with the tool, producing artworks with it, whether would that be like photography, music, or poetry. Okay, if we want to try to think a bit in advance, yes, we can predict that maybe very soon, or probably it's happening already now, that these gadgets will be passing Turing's test very easily. I mean, probably that's already the situation now, where also human, let's say, curator or a critic will not be able to say whether that particular text was written by a human being or by a machine. But I don't really think that is a game changer. I mean, we always had like handfuls of like mediocre mainstream this or that poetry, and to me particularly, it's not really important was it written by a machine, by a human being, or by a cat jumping on a keyboard. And on the other hand, we had always outstanding, amazing, great poetry until this moment written, as we believe, exclusively by human beings. But if in foreseeable future, this kind of poetry, exquisite poetry, amazing poetry that is gonna take hold on us as readers, I don't really think I, at this point, care. Will it be written by machines, cats jumping on pianos or keyboards, some extraterritorials, or like poets in a classical sense? Okay, I might be metaphorically, sowing the branch on which I'm just sitting right now. It could take my job away, but I can't say that I'm too concerned about that. For what we can maybe foresee in this very point, I believe for the time being it's gonna remain a tool, and of course poets will be behind the tool, and they will be training those models to produce something exquisite. But also, if the machine outforces us, if it's gonna write quotation marks better poetry, whatever that would be, than human poets, let it be.
So we can have fun and not try to write poetry, right? The machine can write the poetry and we can have fun and lie on the beach and so on.
Exactly. I mean, we are, I believe, poetry readers. Yeah. And I mean, for some poetry, we don't even know, like, for a bunch of poetry, we are not even aware, who wrote it. If you would just like put a code on a book of some like famous American poet that we know or do not know, and if you just say it was written by a machine, would it actually make any significant difference? Maybe it would in this kind of aura, in this Walter Benjaminian sense, or who knows what. But I mean, as a reader, I believe I would enjoy just the same. And as a creator, as a writer, the fact that there is a machine that can maybe do it way quicker and way better than me still does not diminish my own joy into creating, into playing with language, into exploring. It can just, give some new entries to the field. It can make this fight, this struggle, this game more fun, more interesting, maybe, kind of hotter.
Mm-hmm. So there is, as we speak, there is an infinite poem being written on the webpage universalpoem.com. So Pep, you're behind this project, and I think that this is a project that actually is written by strangers online, and each one is contributing 70 characters. And can you tell us more about the project? How did the idea for this come about? What are its peculiarities? I noticed that the poem actually is running out, and it will run out in approximately 22,000 days, which is like 60 years. So is this something that, like in the end, what happens when the time runs out?
Well, all these verses have been written by human beings.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
It's my job. So, well, right now I think there are more than 50 verses written by human beings from across the world, and it was a project that was born when we were alone at home in 2020 in pandemic, the COVID pandemic. So we weren't able just to organize our festival, and what the decision that we made, Pedro Spread was the creator of this project. It was a way just to join people around a poem and just try just to be together, written a poem together. The typical surrealistic, I don't know the name in English, sorry, Cadáver Exquisito, where people writes a verse after a one verse, Breton and all the people that create this kind of this tool just to work on. So in some way it started like a joke that we won't be able just to create a poem that's written for everyone, but right now it works a lot. each day people are writing there. We correct the verses that they have mistakes, or that they try just to not help the project. So and right now this project has created a lot of things, good things for us. For example, the educational part, that we are really focused on that, and we are working in Versopolis as well, just to create a school, just promote the poetry and the writing, like a way just to help the healthcare of people, because we believe in reading and in poetry, like a way just to help the minds. For example, Marko said that maybe we could be readers of robots that will write their poetry, and I am completely agree about that. But I think, on the other hand, I think that many people write poetry just to help themselves. I think it's the first moment that when young people starts to write poetry, then people try just to create beauty with their poems. But I am completely sure about it that one of the services that has the poetry for people is to help themselves, to help the writer, to help the poet. So I think that in some way, Universal Poem is trying just to create this educational, social branch. Also, we create, as you said, an artistic part, but because we launched the first 20,000 poems translated into binarial language, to zeros and ones, to the universe, but it's another project that we create. So, well, the point is that I think that what we try to do with all these different kinds of projects, like Indomitus Fair book, Universal Poem, the educational part of the Poetry Festival, experimental writing, it's to put people more close to poetry, just to that they understand and they see the poetry in a big way, in a different possibilities, that they will be able just to be more close from the poetry, and also to start writing, because we think that it's really important that the people has to write more. Right now, I see my children, and I see that they usually, this generation, don't read and don't know to write, and I think it's really sad, because I think the brain needs the language to develop, to create more and to be more successful. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that people start writing poetry just to help themselves, right? To hear themselves and to help themselves. And you underlined here a very interesting point about writing poetry, and that is its therapeutic kind of component. And since one of the 5 sub-themes in this year's Poetry Expo is mental health, and I think we're not mental health experts over here, but often we hear that writing poetry is auto-therapeutic. So, Marko, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm definitely by no means a mental health expert, nor I have significant experience in this sort of pedagogy or therapeutic pedagogy or anything. So it's just my very private opinion. I would agree. I would go that on the same page with Pep, that probably also historically observing writing as various other form of expressing yourself, of artistic creation, or what got to be known today or in the last couple of centuries as artistic creation, were actually forms of self exploration, and in a way helping yourself out, actually. And I don't see anything wrong about that, and I don't see anything in particular to be discussed about that aspect of how poetry emerges. But having said that, Well, I think at least I kind of observe it quite separately. The poetry that was meant to be poetry, it was written in an artistic aspiration, regardless did it have in the essence or somewhere in the root also the therapeutical cause or impulse. And the poetry that is basically written primarily because of the therapeutical impulse, and it's not really concerned by the product. And I don't think that people should be worrying about that, the producers, the ones writing that poetry. That's why we have, or we're supposed to be having, or at least once we had various kind of filters which have become maybe way too porous today. I think those filters were in the meantime kind of they got a bit of bad cred. They got completely rebranded as gatekeepers, as something that needs to go down in order for the scene to get fully democratical and so on. I mean, of course, there's a lot of truth to that. But of course, there's a lot of mumbo jumbo too. Not all those filters are there without any reason. And when I say filters, I mean readers, editors, people basically who brings poetry books or poetry in various forms to the audience. To cut long story short, yes, I believe that it's great that people write therapeutical poetry just in order to help themselves, and I support it 100%. But I'm not sure we should be reading all that, and that all these products should be marketed as poetry and put out in form of poetry books, performances, I don't know, social media posts and so on. I'm not sure that on the one hand, yeah, we can observe it, okay, more the merrier, many voices, everyone can put everything in front of the audience and let the audience decide. But on the other hand, of course, it just technically makes a huge mess out of all these voices. We cannot hear anything anymore. It's a cacophony, and basically it's becoming harder and harder to find just anything that you want reads to the end. You just can't focus anymore. It's very hard to navigate, to orientate, and basically what happens, we introduce new filters all the time because we need them. We just cannot operate technically because of the too much information without of those filters. And then these filters are being chosen randomly from different sides, and it ends up often in a cacophony of a field where basically we as readers, if you want, even as consumers of poetry, cannot really decide anymore on what to read, on what is worth of attention, time, and so on and so on. And we really just do not have all the time in the world. It's just becoming a technical problem of decision. And yeah, I would say that we still need some kind of filters in the entrance to the literary field, to the public sphere. Of course, the other question is who controls the filters, who puts them there, and is their function, like quotation mark, honest, or they are just the instrument of the book market, capital, profit-oriented companies, or so on.
Yeah. Pep, would you have something to add to this?
Well, no, not at all. I think that, well, yes, maybe, I don't know. I see all the art has a therapeutical use for people that create art. From the whole history, I don't know, painters, musicians, writers, poets. not all of the art has a therapeutical use, but obviously many of them they have a therapeutical. If you read, I don't know, Artaud, Anthony Artaud, or Rimbaud, or even Walt Whitman, I don't know, this classical, or Emily Dickinson, you find that how they write just to save themselves in some way, yeah, just to put letters on a paper. I think that it helps people, like musicians, for example, music. Classical music, modern music, I don't know. So I think that yes, the art is really important, first of all, for the people who create this art, and secondly, for the people who consume this art. For me, for example, and I see in many of my customers here in the bookshop, or in the poetry festival anyway, the point is that I see that we help people, we help to understand themselves. I think the art, the poetry books, one of the goals of the poetry books is to help people to understand themselves, because sometimes when you read these books, you understand better yourself. So yes, completely sure that all the books in some way help people. The problem is that you have to find the book that will help you because it's not easy. But I am completely sure that many people in the world, or all the people in the world, have many kind of books that they will help themselves. And anyway, it's a poetry, a novel, an essay. I don't know. It depends on the moment as well. Because for me, for example, when you read a book when you are a teenager, it's not the same that read the same book right now when you are 40s. It's completely different. Right now, it's impossible to read that book. No. So I think that each book, each poet, each artist has a moment in our lives, and the art. One of the part is to create enjoy to people, not to enjoy in a party, for example, is one of the goals of the art. Another goal of the art could be obviously this one, to help yourself. And there are many goals of art. I think poetry, and sorry, because many times I'm referring to the art, not to the poetry, because one of the fights that we try to do is like to put the poetry at the same level as the music, as the cinema, painting, because I think that we are one of them, but we are not minus of them. Maybe sometimes we are more than. So, well, that's, I think, maybe just to say a little bit more that Marko said.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. So we're nearing the end, and well, the last question, since we're in January, which is the time for, you know, the New Year's resolutions, the new year, new me, what New Year's resolutions would you give to your respective festivals, or to the Poetry Expo 24, or to poetry in general?
Marko?
Well, I don't know, but probably just to keep changing, to keep listening, not to get, you know, metaphorically old and fat and comfortable, sitting comfortably in your chair, and just to listen what's around you, to give time and space to the new time and new practices, and to recognize, you know, to sometimes to also to go against yourself, against your own impulse, because your impulse just might come from a wrong time or wrong space, or just like it can just be yours, deeply yours. And festival is not something that should please you in the first place. It's a platform, it's an open forum. It's, at least in the case of Goran Spring, Goranovo Proljeće, it's something that was happening way before my time, and it's gonna be happening, if everything is gonna be okay, way after my time. So it's a platform, it's a collective endeavor. It's basically a space for listening of other experiences, languages, poetic forms, models, concepts, and so on, giving them space, trying to figure out how do they work in our local context, and like grow and to basically influence our local poetry scene as much as possible, to give it some kind of a new sway, of like the infusion of new and fresh blood. And that's why also Versopolis is extremely important for us. As you know, we are part of the project from the very beginning, and since then we are in very intensive contact with the other organizers. We keep meeting, we keep traveling to meet each other, and really we keep on learning from other festivals. We keep implementing interesting discoveries or practices of theirs, and this vivid exchange is not to be overstated. We just need to keep on. We need to keep moving, because like if we don't, the poetry will suffer.
Excellent, beautifully put, Marko. And Pep?
Well, I think more or less as Marko said, I think that we have to listen. I'll be content just working on that, working on poetry, having this kind of freedom that we have. I think that we are really lucky just to be able just to work on what we want to do. It's really difficult, and I think all the people that are working on Versopolis platform, all of us, we are really lucky. Actually, I think that all the people that are living in Europe are really happy, because the situation in the world is completely crazy. So in some way, yes, I'd be content just working on poetry and keeping pushing about that, how poetry has to arrive to more people, and keeping our festival alive. That right now I think it will be stabilized for more years in a new venue here in Madrid. So, well, I don't know. I think that we have to keep working on. Life is too short, and we have to enjoy it.
Excellent. So thank you both again. So we came to the end of Versopolis episode 12 with Marko Pogačar and Pep Olona. Thank you both for your time again, and have a great day.